Welcome to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for joining us. Well, Nevada's legalization of marijuana, both for medicinal and recreational use, is really a good example of the battle between state rights and federal rights. Now, the laws on the national level disagree with the 31 states that have legalized marijuana use in some form. Now, over the last several years, the federal government has kind of turned a blind eye on the states with legal pot, choosing not to allocate resources to enforcement, basically deferring to each state's preferences. Well, now it looks like the federal government is changing that policy. So attorney Katie Hoffman with Fenimore Craig is here with me now to talk about this. Katie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so kind of the backbone of all of this discussion is what's called the Cole Memo. So maybe you could start by explaining what that is.
Sure. Well, as you just mentioned, Nevada is one of a number of states now that allow medical marijuana use and also recreational marijuana use. And while Nevada has laws on the books that allow licensed businesses to engage in that business, that's still illegal under the Federal Controlled Substances Act. And the Cole Memorandum was essentially a policy position articulated by the Justice Department during the Obama administration. And that policy position outlined a number of priorities for the federal government. And some of those priorities included things like preventing sales of marijuana to children, stopping revenue from marijuana businesses from flowing towards gangs or other criminal organizations, stopping cultivation of marijuana on federal land. And so the memorandum essentially offered this guidance to states. For states that wanted to adopt robust regulations that addressed those concerns and prevented those activities from occurring, if states were willing to rigorously enforce those regulations, the Justice Department decided it would not allocate its scarce prosecutorial resources to target licensed businesses that complied with state law.
Okay, so this kind of opened up the industry in these states where it was, voted in usually by general vote of the people to create a marijuana industry that they at least believed at that time would be safe from federal prosecution. And now that Cole Memo has been rescinded, tell me what's different.
Well, there's always been a degree of risk, and when we work with marijuana businesses for licensing and compliance, we always start out with, you have to remember this is illegal under federal law. We can't offer any assurances that won't be a problem for you down the road. But the Cole Memo did give business owners a degree of security, knowing that if they scrupulously complied with state law, that they should be able to sleep at night without concerns that the FBI or DEA could show up at their doorstep and shut down their business. Without the Cole Memo in place, it really adds another element of risk into what is already a very uncertain and new industry. And so business owners are sort of reevaluating the risks and rewards of this line of work and looking at how they can best protect themselves in this new era.
Right. Now, Attorney General Jeff Sessions did rescind the memo, but didn't explicitly direct resources toward enforcement. So at this point, it appears to be kind of up to the interpretation of each U.S. attorney, right?
Essentially, yes, and that's part of the uncertainty that every business owner is going to be grappling with. It really is now up to the individual U.S. attorneys in each state how they're going to look at the issue. Some U.S. attorneys have come out. For example, Colorado's U.S. attorney has said they don't right now intend to change their enforcement priorities. Others, Massachusetts, they said, well, we're going to look at it. Maybe yes, maybe no. Nevada has a new interim U.S. attorney, and we don't know her position on this issue yet. So it remains to be seen, what exactly Nevada business owners are going to face moving forward.
So if you have a client come to you and say they own a dispensary and they're concerned about all of this, what's your legal advice for them to be as protected as they can be?
Our best advice to them is to continue to really, really be careful in how you operate. Make sure you're in strict compliance with state law. Don't play fast and loose with state regulations. Make sure all of your T's are crossed and I's dotted. Because that's why Nevada enacted such rigorous regulations, was to help protect business owners. Because during the era of the Cole Memo, the tighter and better the state laws were, the more business owners could breathe a sigh of relief if they were in compliance. And so we're still advising people to carefully comply with state law and make sure they're doing everything that they can to be in compliance.
What about for users of marijuana, whether they're using it for recreational use or for medicinal use? Is there a difference in the way the federal government sees that?
You know, it's still illegal under federal law in both scenarios. The federal government doesn't recognize medical marijuana as a legitimate use. However, they do, in practical terms, seem to see a distinction in those. And so medical patients are probably somewhat better off than recreational users, just in terms of how the government would look at enforcing actions against those types of people.
Okay, and then for recreational users, I mean, would you tell them to stop doing it? Because a lot of recreational users do use it for medical purposes, they just don't have that doctor's note.
Sure, and now in Nevada you don't need a doctor's note or a medical card to purchase marijuana products. For the users, I think the guidelines would be the same. Be very careful in how you use marijuana. Make sure you comply with state law in terms of how you handle it. Make sure that it can't come into contact with minors. Make sure you don't possess more than the lawful limit. And make sure you're really doing everything you can not to run afoul of even our lenient marijuana laws.
Now, say let's go to the extremist case scenario where Attorney General Sessions says, okay, I want to devote a whole bunch of federal resources to going after marijuana in the states where it's legal. I don't know that that will happen, that he hasn't indicated that that's going to be the case, but say he did, could that effectively shut down the marijuana industry in Nevada?
That line of action could certainly send a very serious message to Nevada businesses and to Nevada dispensary owners. Like you said, we haven't seen that aggressive position be taken yet. I think it's something that everyone's considering and looking at. You know, and in that circumstance, I think we would really need to look to our congressional delegation to step in. I know the delegates from Colorado and Alaska and our Nevada senators have also expressed some concern about where this is heading, and I think, quite frankly, this could sort of push Congress into taking action to address this issue, because it has been a problem for a number of years. Marijuana businesses have always butted up against the federal prohibition, and it's impacted businesses in a lot of ways, particularly in the banking space. Right. And so this could be the push Congress needs to finally confront this issue and find a path forward that works for everyone.
And really all they would have to do is remove it from that listing, right? I mean, just, or would they have to make a broad legalization for medicinal and recreational use? Could they just remove it from the list of like banned substances?
Sure, I think they would start with the Controlled Substances Act and look at whether it's appropriate for marijuana to remain classified where it's at. I think any congressional change would likely have to leave it up to states for how they would want to address this issue. Many states are heading towards legalization both for medical and recreational, but certainly not all jurisdictions are interested in doing that. So it really comes down to states' rights and whether Congress is going to make space for states to make these decisions themselves.
And this does seem to be the direction states are moving in, I think, as they realize how big of a cash cow the marijuana industry is. I mean, just in Nevada in the first 3 months, I think we saw like $12.5 million in tax revenue just in the first 3 months. And it's a kind of a cornerstone of the governor's budget even. I mean, a lot of new programs were based on that marijuana tax revenue. So if this were dismantled, it could cause some serious budgetary issues for every state where it's legal.
It certainly could. Colorado, for example, their annual marijuana sales have topped $1 billion now. So it's a large industry in some of these states. And even Republican governors and Republican states have looked at this to fill budget gaps where needed.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Okay, so what other legal advice do you have? You know, there are a lot of people taking part in this and probably a lot of people who are concerned.
Sure, I think always find legal representation. You need to surround yourselves with very smart attorneys, accountants, bankers. This area implicates a lot of areas of the law, both in business formation and how you do your taxes and how you're accounting for revenue. Security experts are also important, given that these are all cash businesses. So it takes a village to create a marijuana business. So we recommend our clients have a solid business plan, engage with expertise in all areas, and think seriously about how they want to move into this space.
Okay, so is a congressional action kind of the only solution here, or are there other solutions that can be pursued through, the court system, or even just, another memo, for example?
Well, I think long term, really the best way forward for marijuana businesses is to push for congressional action to resolve this once and for all. As administrations change, this situation can vary, and that's really hard for businesses to deal with. So I think congressional action is really the best way forward. There's always policy and priorities that different DOJs might have. And even Congress has tried to help with various stopgap measures in terms of, budget limitations on marijuana enforcement activities and things like that. But again, those are all sort of temporary fixes to what is a long-term, larger problem.
All right, Katie, we have about a little less than a minute left. Do you have any final message before we go to break?
I would just advise marijuana businesses to really know what you're getting into, and advise marijuana users to make sure they're very careful in how they use, don't use and drive, and make sure they do their best to comply with the law.
Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Well, coming up on Face the State, starting up a new business in Northern Nevada seems to be the thing to do these days in our growing economy, but a shocking number of new businesses fail. I'll sit down with one group hoping to help them stay open and in the black right after the break.